In 1793, in the fog-haunted woodlands of Rhode Island, a colonial surveyor's ink line refused to close, and a simple cabin became the center of a secret that history was never meant to hold. His name was Ephraim Wells, a man of lines and laws, of chains and compasses, a man whose entire world was built on the principle that reality could be measured, could be mapped, could be contained within the clean, crisp borders of a deed. He was an agent of order in a world still wild, still untamed. But on April 6th of that year, order failed him. He stood before a small, unremarkable cabin on a parcel designated Lot 14. Cedar siding, a sloping roof, quiet. His job was simple: sketch the structure, confirm its four walls, and mark its place in the grand design of the township. He dipped his quill, drew the first line, then the second, the third, but the fourth would not meet. The ink, his own familiar iron gall ink, seemed to thin, to resist the parchment. It arced just slightly, a faint, almost imperceptible curve that looped beneath the structure, refusing to form the perfect 90-degree angle that his mind, his hand, and the very laws of geometry demanded. He tried again, and again. Each time on fresh, clean parchment, the same result. A fifth interior angle, unmeasured, unmarked, and utterly impossible. In the margin of his journal, his precise, controlled script began to fray. Corner would not meet, he wrote, the words tight, almost strangled. Line would not return, not my hand. This wasn't an error of wind or terrain. This was something else. This was the paper, the ink, the very space he was trying to map, pushing back. He was a man who drew the boundaries of the world, and for the first time the world was telling him he had it wrong. It was a message he would spend the rest of his short career trying to understand. A message that began not with a sound, not with a specter, but with a single, defiant, unending line. You're not supposed to know this, but the tools of mapmakers are instruments of control. A compass needle doesn't just find north, it imposes it. A measuring chain doesn't just gauge distance, it divides and conquers the land. Ephraim Wells understood this. It was his faith. But on Lot 14 his faith was shaken. The next day, April 7th, he returned. The air was heavy, the sky a sheet of gray slate. He walked the perimeter of the cabin 3 times, his boots sinking into the damp soil. 4 walls, rectangular, he could see it, he could touch it. The wood grain was consistent, the joints were sound. But the numbers were lying. His journal tells the story of a mind coming undone. The northeast wall measured 21 feet 7 inches. Then minutes later, with the same chain, the same tension, it measured 20 feet 11 inches. On his third pass, it was 21 feet 7 inches again. He underlined the second, rogue figure. His handwriting a tremor in the ink. Second measure should not differ, he scribbled. Compass steady, chain straight, no slope. He was trying to reason with something that had no reason. In the official plat filed with the township, the discrepancy is gone, erased. Only the consistent, logical measurement remains. But the original draft, the one they keep locked away in the archives, that one tells the truth. It contains the strike-through, and beneath it, something more unsettling. Under ultraviolet light, you can see what he tried to erase. The rogue number, 20 feet 11 inches, had been written twice. Once in his graphite and once more overlaid in a faint, foreign ink stacked perfectly on top of his own. The hand was not his. The rhythm was wrong. It was a correction made by a ghost. In his notes, Wells never mentions the overwritten number, but he does describe a growing sickness, a vertigo that had nothing to do with height. Third circuit produced dizziness, he wrote. Felt certain of direction, but view seemed wrong. Trees did not move, but light did. They would say he was dehydrated, tired, but he knew. He was measuring a place that changed when he wasn't looking, a place that corrected its own records. There's a quote from the philosopher-scientist Blaise Pascal. Our nature consists in motion, complete rest is death. He was talking about the human soul, but what if he was also talking about a place, a structure? What if some things are never at rest? The cabin on Lot 14 was, by all accounts, structurally sound, but it wasn't at rest. Years later, long after Ephraim Wells had vanished from the record, builders arrived to square the foundation for a reconstruction. They found what Wells had found. One corner, the northeast corner, refused to align. It defied the plumb bob, the spirit level, the very idea of a right angle. Frustrated, they did what men of action do. They forced it. They shaved 3/4 of an inch from the northeast joist, a brutal act of carpentry meant to impose order. But when they went back inside, they found the interior wall had gained 2 inches in the opposite direction. Can you imagine that? For every inch they took, it gave itself 2 more. It was a living equation, a structure that balanced its own books. The project was abandoned, but the story of the surveyor's chain is perhaps the most quietly disturbing piece of the puzzle. Wells's original measuring chain, tagged with his initials, was eventually placed in the town archive. In 1984, a curious museum official used it for an exhibit on early cartography. He looped it on a display nail, expecting it to fall in 4 even sections, a perfect, sagging square. It did not. The chain fell naturally without coaxing into 5 sections. Not 4, 5. And each of the first 4 sections matched a measurement on Wells's official sanitized cabin plat. The 5th length, the extra one, the one that shouldn't have been there. It measured precisely 20 feet, 11 inches. The exact number Wells had measured and then desperately tried to erase. A number that no longer appeared in any official record. And yet, on the back of the museum exhibit label, someone had written faintly in pencil, "Returned again." Underneath, same number, same weight. The handwriting has never been identified. It doesn't match any museum staff, past or present. It's just there. A quiet testament. The chain remembers the wall that shouldn't be. The truth doesn't always bleed through. Sometimes it's written down in plain sight, just waiting for someone to compare the copies. The 1793 census of Providence Township was a model of colonial bureaucracy. Headcounts, occupations, names, all recorded in duplicate by a clerk named Elias Branson. Branson was a man known for his consistency, for an upright, clean hand and a distinctive curl in his lowercase r. His work was trusted. On the township's copy of the census, his entry for Lot 14 is unremarkable. Abram H. Foster, farmer. Lydia Foster, wife. Nathaniel Foster, son, age 12. Elias Foster, son, age 8. 4 names, a complete family unit. The ink is black, the spacing is perfect. The page bears Branson's signature and the township seal. It is a closed loop, a finished story. But the second copy, the one sent to the county archives in Warwick, that one tells a different tale. It contains the same entry in the same order in the same hand. But beneath the name Elias Foster, separated by a faint, deliberate dash, is a 5th line. Nora F. No roll listed, just a name. The ink is indistinguishable from the rest. There is no sign of a later edition, no break in the alignment. It looks as if it has always been there. And yet there's a detail that chills the blood. Branson's signature, his mark of authenticity, appears above the 5th name, not below it. As if he had finished his work, signed off on it, and then something else or someone else finished the list. The name Nora F. appears nowhere else. No tax record, no baptism, no grave. She is a ghost in the census, a name with no life attached, or so they thought. When archivists first flagged the inconsistency in 1921, they dismissed it. A clerical error, a smudge. It's what we do with things that don't fit, isn't it? We explain them away. But the truth has a weight. It sinks into the page. Decades later, in 1978, they looked at that 5th name again, this time under a stereo microscope, and they saw what the naked eye had missed. The ink forming the name Nora had penetrated deeper into the parchment than the rest of the text, not smeared but sunk, as if it had been written with an unnatural pressure, or perhaps on skin that was still damp. The lab report from that year contains a sentence that should be impossible. It lists the entry as technically older than surrounding lines based on oxidation density. Older. How can something be written after yet be older than what came before? The handwriting doesn't match Branson's. There's no telltale flourish on the R. It is a restrained, precise script, written by someone imitating form but not rhythm, a perfect copy with a dead soul, and the mystery only deepens. 6 months later, in the township ledger, a routine list of household yields was recorded. The Foster family is listed again, 4 names only: Abram, Lydia, Nathaniel, Elias. A return to normalcy, but at the very bottom of the page, in the kind of faint pencil script that feels like a whisper, someone added a note. Foster 5 confirmed, Branson unaware. The handwriting on that note has never been attributed. The graphite itself was confirmed to be from the 19th century, decades after the original ink entry. The note was just found wedged between two blank pages of the ledger, a secret passed down through time. Someone knew. Someone was counting. Someone was watching the official record and leaving their own, a shadow ledger of the truth. The seal on the census folder has been repressed twice, but if you look closely, the outer wax ring shows 3 impressions. Someone opened it, added their truth, and sealed it up again, hiding their work in plain sight. You're not just watching this story, you are becoming part of it. Your attention is the light that illuminates these hidden corners. In late November of 1793, a carpenter named Thaddeus Vale was sent to the Foster cabin. A neighbor had reported storm damage. North corner sagging, the work order read. Water ingress. Vale was a practical man, a man of wood and iron, of plane and saw. He arrived expecting to find a simple leak, a rotted beam. He was not prepared for what he found inside. The exterior was normal enough. Cedar boards warped with frost but sound. But when he stepped inside and turned to inspect the east wall, his practical world tilted on its axis. The wall was seamless, not just well-joined but continuous. Flush from the floor to the loft rail, there was no seam, no crossbeam, no end grain. Vale, a man who had spent his life studying the art of joinery, could find no trace of it. It was as if the wall had grown there, a single, unbroken plank of wood. The grain itself was wrong. Instead of the natural spiral of cedar, it ran in perfect vertical lines, then just stopped at the loft edge. He ran his hand over it, not painted, not covered, just unjoined. He took out his awl, a sharp steel tool, and gently scratched at the surface, expecting a thin veneer to peel away. The tool left no mark. It slid across the surface as if it were glass. His ledger, a book of costs and labor, suddenly becomes a journal of unease. Not plain, not surfaced, he wrote. Uncarved, cannot mark it. Frustrated, he stepped back outside into the world of normal physics and remeasured the exterior. It was perfect. The east wall aligned with the others. No bowing, no protrusion. But inside, when he leaned his weight against it, he heard a groan, not from the floorboards, not from the wind in the eaves. The sound came from the wall itself. A low, wooden pressure sound, like the string of an overtuned cello, stretched to the breaking point. Imagine standing in that room, the low fire, the smell of wood smoke and damp earth. The family, the 4 of them, seated quietly at the table watching him. Their faces are placid, their eyes dark. Thaddeus Vale, a man of noise and action, is unnerved by their silence. He turns from the groaning wall and asks about the sound. Abram Foster looks up from his plate, his expression unchanging, and says only one sentence. We let it settle. What does that even mean? Let it settle. Settle into what? Vale didn't ask again. He completed a few minor repairs to a window frame, collected his fee, but he did not touch the interior wall. He couldn't. Before he left, he did something strange. He took a piece of charcoal and made 4 vertical marks on the wall, spaced a foot apart. A carpenter's habit, a way of marking a problem to be solved later. He signed his name beside them and dated it. He never returned. But 6 years later, when a township inspector visited the property, the charcoal lines were gone. In their place were 5 horizontal marks, not drawn but burned shallowly into the wood. They were not evenly spaced, and a 6th line had been started near the floorboard, faint, half-formed, as if the artist had been interrupted. No tool marks were ever found nearby. No heat source could explain the charring. It was as if the wall had marked itself. In the cabinet beneath the loft, inspectors found Vale's original awl. It had been placed gently on a folded piece of canvas. Its sharp steel tip was blunted, rounded, as if it had been pressed again and again against something harder than itself. His name was still carved into the handle, but the lettering was wrong. The T in Thaddeus was reversed. The final E had been doubled. It was a subtle corruption, a mirror image of the man who had dared to try and mark the wall. Years later, Vale's son would draw the cabin from memory for a local historical society. He drew it just as his father had described it, but he added one detail his father never officially recorded. A 5th interior wall. No door, no seam. Just a flat, silent face where the light, he said, always bent slightly wrong. Sometimes the most damning evidence isn't preserved in an archive, but by fire. In 1818, a lightning strike burned the barn on Lot 14 to the ground. While sifting through the charred, smoking debris, volunteers found a small cedar box, sealed with a leather strap, remarkably intact. Inside was the Foster family ledger. Not a financial ledger, but a record of life itself. Date, meals served, duties assigned, and a fourth column, occupants present. For most families, such a book would be a simple curiosity. But this ledger revealed a pattern that twisted the family's story into something new and unsettling. Across 47 pages, every single weekly entry records a dinner table set for 5. 4 of the seats are filled by name: Abram, Lydia, Nathaniel, Elias. The fifth seat is often left blank, but not always. In about a third of the entries, a fifth name appears. Never the same name twice: Judith, Samuel, Wren. And then stranger names, names that don't belong to the time or the region. Owl, Karen, Val. The handwriting never changes. The ink remains consistent. The names are entered with the same calm, methodical precision as the meals and chores. Each name appears only once, with no age, no role, no explanation. Just a name at the table. For decades, historians dismissed these as placeholders, a game the children played. But in 1972, a local genealogist named Meredith Croy cross-referenced these phantom dinner guests against old-school registers. And what she found pulls the entire history of the Foster family apart at the seams. In the township school logs from 1793 to 1795, the names of the Foster boys, Nathaniel and Elias, appear regularly. But their surnames change. In March, Nathaniel Foster is enrolled. In April, he's listed as Nathaniel Falk. By June, the record reads Nathaniel Foreign. There are no corrections, no strike-throughs. The teacher, a Miriam Chaffee known for her strict, rigid script, enters each new name as if it were fact, uncontested, valid. What would you do, honestly, if you were a teacher in a one-room schoolhouse and every month the same 2 boys had a different last name, and no one, not the parents, not the children, ever acknowledged it? Miriam Chaffee's letters, preserved in the County Education Archive, suggest she was aware of the inconsistencies, though she never dared to admit it publicly. In a letter to her sister dated August 1794, she writes, "The Foster boys are clever and kind, but I do not know what to call them this month. I have taken to writing only their first names. No one corrects me." Her tone is tired, resigned, not alarmed. It's the tone of someone who has learned not to ask questions about things that don't add up. But a second letter, a draft that was never sent, was found decades after her death, tucked into the back of her personal hymn book. One line was underlined twice with a heavy, forceful stroke: "They never blink when I call them wrong." Can you feel the chill in that, the psychological horror of it? The boys knew. They knew they weren't who the records said they were. They were participating in the fiction. But whose fiction was it? The story comes full circle in 1991. While digitizing local records, a clerk discovered something that connected all the threads. Every single name listed in the Foster's dinner ledger, those phantom fifth guests, every single one of them also appears once, and only once, in regional tax exemption lists filed between 1789 and 1811. Not as landowners, not as residents, but as dependents. Each time, with no household attached. A list of dependents belonging to no one. The signature beside each of these exemptions belongs to a known Providence clerk, but the ink is a strange brown red, not his usual black, and his name is printed vertically in the margin, in the exact same hand used throughout the Foster family ledger. A secret network of names, woven through the official documents of the state, all leading back to that fifth seat at the dinner table. There's a rumor among old archivists, a story they only tell late at night after the vaults are locked. They say that some documents are alive, that paper and ink can hold a memory, and that sometimes 2 memories pressed together for too long can bleed into one another. The baptismal register of St. Giles Parish, a heavy linen-wrapped book, contains an entry for August 14, 1793. Elias Foster, son of Abram and Lydia, baptized in good standing. The priest at the time, Reverend Isaac Morrow, was known for a severe, backward-leaning script. The entry is his, but beneath the child's name, so faint it was missed for over a century, is another name. Owl, one of the names from the dinner ledger. At first, they thought it was bleed-through from the opposing page, an entry for a girl named Judith Karen. But when a conservator in 1967 tried to separate the pages, she saw it wasn't a simple ink transfer. The letters from the opposite page hadn't just seeped through in reverse. They had rearranged themselves. Judith's J had reformed into an A. The other letters had followed, as if the very fibers of the paper had conspired to rewrite the name. Chemical tests showed no tampering, no second application of ink. The page had simply absorbed the second name. A passive redrafting, the conservator wrote in her report. When questioned about it years later, Reverend Morrow was adamant. "The child's name was Elias," he wrote. "I remember it, for he cried without tears. If the parchment bears a second name, it is not mine. But the register holds its own secrets. At the bottom of the entry for Elias, there's a wax seal. It bears the parish insignia, but the wax itself is wrong. It's a reddish color, not the standard black resin used in the 1790s. In fact, it matches the blend the parish adopted after a renovation in 1812, nearly 2 decades after the baptism. The seal is there, but there is no priest's signature beside it, which was required for any alteration. It's an official seal on an unofficial change. At the bottom of the facing page, written vertically in the spine, are 4 words in pale graphite. Let the fold decide. When you close the book, the inked names of Elias and Owl align perfectly, letter for letter, across the seam. And on humid days, they say the second name, Owl, appears brighter, clearer than the first. The fold decides. If you've come this far, comment "The truth bleeds through" below. You're beginning to understand. The problem wasn't just the cabin. It was everything the cabin touched. Every record, every person. In 1804, a young cartographer named Silas Rylance was sent to rechart the parcels of land near Lot 14. He was meticulous, precise, a man who trusted his instruments above all else. His formal report is brief. Lot 14, it reads, uninhabited cabin, frame intact, orientation offset from plat. But his personal notebook, the one he never intended for anyone to see, tells a story of instruments failing and reality warping. He describes measuring the foundation of the abandoned cabin. The air, he writes, tasted slightly metallic in the northeast corner. He takes out his brass calipers to triangulate the corners. The first 3 points lock true, but the fourth, the northwest edge, refuses. The legs of his own trusted tool seem to resist closing. Then he writes, they close in reverse, tightening without any pressure from his hand. He lays the calipers on a rock and steps away, unnerved. When he returns, the legs are locked completely shut. He writes nothing more that day. His final map of the area is a work of art. Every parcel line, every tree, every slight change in elevation is rendered with exacting precision. But Lot 14, the place he was sent to document, is a blank. A perfect, empty rectangle of white space on the parchment, as if he had masked it off before he began drawing. Archivists later found faint impressions under the paper, the ghost of a cabin outline that had been traced and then lifted. Not erased, but lifted away. Rylance's nephew, who donated the papers after his death, added a note to the back of the map in clumsy charcoal letters. Uncertain property. Do not insert. In 1938, those same calipers were found in a dusty box in the university archives. A curator noticed something odd. The engraved numbers on the inner leg, the ones that measured distance, appeared backward, mirrored from within. The instrument was defective, except it was. The reversed measurements still produced accurate readings, but only when applied to curved surfaces. On flat paper, they created a gap. One archivist wrote that the structure hadn't failed the measurement. It had simply rejected it. It didn't need his numbers. There is an accounting book bound in untreated calfskin, catalogued under the name Foster, A 1793-1799. It's a record of household purchases: oats, salt, boots, hemp. The kind of mundane, everyday ledger that tells the quiet story of a family's survival. Most ledgers of the time had 4 columns: date, item, quantity, value. This one had 5. The 5th column has no title, no heading, no units of currency or measurement. And yet every single row for over 600 entries contains a notation in that final field, a name. Ellsworth R. Jonas, Calamy, Wade, none of the names ever appear more than once. The script is tidy, fluid, and consistent, suggesting a single educated hand, not Abram Foster. His known signature is labored and rough. Someone else was keeping this book. Someone was logging these names alongside the purchases as if they were assets, or perhaps debts. The archivist who first reviewed the ledger in 1897 wrote in his notes, "It is as though one were keeping a guest book beside a purchase log." But these were no ordinary guests. A historian tried to trace the names. None appeared in any known Rhode Island baptismal records, land deeds, or burial documents of the period. They were names without people, signatures without bodies, except for one. An entry dated October 12, 1795, lists the purchase of 1 bag of flour. In the 5th column, the name is entered, Rylance Silas, the same name as the university cartographer who would visit the cabin 9 years later. At the time of that ledger entry, Silas Rylance was an 11-year-old boy living 30 miles away. There is no record he ever visited Providence as a child. How did his name get in their book? In the margin beside that impossible line, there is a faint smudge, the barest impression of a wax seal, as if it were pressed hastily and then pulled away, leaving just the edge of a circle. Today, the ledger is kept behind UV-filtered glass, and under direct light, the 5th column shimmers differently than the others. The ink is glossier, less porous, as though it were written to be seen from a different angle, or under a different kind of light, a light that can see across time. Control is an illusion. We write things down, we create records, we certify them with signatures and seals, all in an attempt to fix reality in place. But what happens when the records begin to write themselves? On the morning of May 4, 1812, a clerk named Thomas Marrow was found sitting motionless at his desk in the Providence County Register's office. The room was dark. An inkwell had bled across the parchment in front of him. His hands were stained. He had been there all night transcribing property transfers, but the sheet in front of him was not a property transfer. It was a marriage certificate for a 5th foster child, Nora F., age listed as 19. The witness field was signed by Thomas Marrow himself. The field for the clergy read, "Witnessed by the absent." The signature was his, but the pressure of the pen was heavy, reluctant, as if his hand had been guided. When questioned, Marrow was lost in a fog of confusion. He remembered opening the registry, selecting the ink, but he had no memory of writing the certificate. He claimed the name had already been there half-written, and he had only finished it out of a strange, inexplicable compulsion. "It felt," he later testified, "like reading aloud something I hadn't seen before but already knew." The document was never certified. It was filed away in an archive for anomalous entries. No one named Nora Foster ever applied for a marriage license again. But the story doesn't end there. 8 years later, during a recataloging, the sheet was found again. But this time it listed Nathaniel Foster as the groom. The bride's name was blurred, overwritten with faint graphite. And the second witness signature, it was a near-perfect match for Marrow's own, but it slanted to the right, not the left. A handwriting analyst in 1956 called it a mimic of self. The same mind writing twice, but with a different muscle memory. As if he had signed it once as himself and once as his own ghost. Marrow left the registry office 2 years later, citing nervous strain. The certificate remains in a sealed drawer, filed between 2 empty folders. On the inside lip of the cabinet, someone scratched 5 letters into the wood, SPARE. When Lydia Foster died in 1815, a neighbor named Elias Crandall was sent to take inventory of the cabin's contents for probate court. The house was weather-worn, mostly empty. A few straw mattresses, a copper kettle, and a small, handcrafted cedar desk tucked beneath the stairs. Crandall noted it had 4 drawers. When he tried to open the bottom left drawer, it stuck. He pulled harder and the backboard came loose, revealing a hollow space behind it. He thought it was a secret compartment, but there was no lock, no hinge. Instead, a narrow, featureless panel slid away and a 5th drawer moved forward on its own. It wasn't on runners or rails. It simply presented itself. The fifth drawer was narrower than the others, its wood rough and unfinished. Inside there was a tightly coiled bundle of horsehair, knotted in loops, and woven into the strands were names, not written in ink but scored into the horsehair with the tip of a sharpened iron nail. He counted 22 names: Noyes, Addington, Lath, Mell, Drum. None of them appeared in the family ledger or the town census. They were another list of the lost. He documented them and put the bundle back. But the real mystery was how he saw the drawer in the first place. His official statement says he was adjusting his position due to a glare of light. But a private letter, found decades later, tells a more disturbing story. He wrote that the drawer would not appear unless he was standing in a very specific spot against the east wall beside the hearth with one shoulder behind what he called the fifth corner. There is no fifth corner in a four-wall room. The cabin's plans show no such recess. Yet Crandall insisted. From that one specific vantage point, the drawer was simply there, not open but visible. "I only saw it once," he wrote. When municipal recorders revisited the inventory in 1874, the desk was still there, but the fifth drawer was gone. In its place was a smooth backing of cedar nailed flush. No sign of tampering. One nail was loose. And beneath its head someone had scratched a name, so small it had been missed for 60 years. N. Foster. Not Nathaniel, not Nora. Just an initial followed by a strange, looped glyph that looked like a closed seam. Let's talk about ghosts. Not the kind that rattle chains, but the kind that sign their names to architectural plans. In 1872, the Providence Historical Preservation Society commissioned scale drawings of the Foster cabin for a new museum exhibit. The job was given to a respected architect named Aldous Farquham, a man known for his obsessive precision. He was a real person. His name appeared in the town directory, tax rolls, the tradesman's registry. The drawings he produced still exist. Floor plans, elevations, cross-sections, but one drawing is different. It's a floor plan dated March 19, 1873. The four walls are drawn to scale, but the interior angles are wrong. And in the margin, Farquham has written a phrase that exists nowhere in the language of architecture. Fifth turn, viewed internally. A fifth turn in a four-sided room. When museum staff later tried to cross-reference the plan with Farquham's employment file, they found nothing. His name wasn't in the payroll ledgers. He wasn't on the contributor roster. He had been paid, he had done the work, but the institution had no official memory of him. Researchers, confused, reached out to his descendants. They were told Aldous Farquham had never worked in architecture. He'd been a carpenter in his youth but left the trade long before the commission. They had no letters, no photographs, nothing to connect him to the project. And yet his signature is there, clear as day, on the bottom of the drawing. Beneath his signature is a number, 112. It's not a page number, but it does correspond to the staff catalog of architectural contributors. It corresponds to another man, Orland Wilkes, who had died in 1871, a year before the commission even began. The plan is signed by a man who didn't do the work and numbered for a man who was already dead. The exhibit was never built. The cabin parts remained in storage. Years later, a copy of Farquham's strange floor plan was found tucked behind a display case. The ink was still crisp, but the signature was gone. In its place was just a long black M dash. And stamped in the corner in faint red ink were 3 lines: not built, not filed, not returned. And on the back a single penciled word: spared. In 1912, the Foster cabin was finally moved from storage and reassembled on a polished granite foundation in the museum's new sub-level archival wing. The dimensions were precise. The floor was level. The work was perfect. Within 3 months, the complaints began. Staff reported a persistent sensation of a downward slant when standing near the cabin's eastern wall. Photographs taken from the northwest corner always appeared subtly off-axis, as if the camera were being pulled down and to the right. The floor was rechecked with every instrument they had. It was perfectly level, so they installed thermometers at the 4 corners. The readings were consistent, 68 degrees Fahrenheit, except for one spot, the interior angle formed by the eastern wall and the rear beam, the spot the staff had started calling the odd notch. There, the thermometer read 58 degrees. 10 degrees colder than the rest of the room. They placed a second instrument beside it. The reading matched. The anomaly was attributed to poor insulation and air current. But no vents, no seams, no moisture could be found. The foundation was stone dry. 6 months later, during a summer heat wave, the temperature gap remained. The room fluctuated. The corner stayed frozen. Guests described feeling off balance near that wall. An intern swore that a metal clipboard placed on the floor would drift slowly toward the cold corner over several minutes. The foundation was checked again, still level. In 1927, they installed a state-of-the-art tilt meter near the area. Its needle settled slightly east of true zero, pulsed once, sharply, and then stopped moving forever. The device was boxed and put back into storage. In the exhibit log from that year, a curator made a note in the margin beside the Foster cabin entry. Stonework even, air still. But the corner moves. Today, the cabin is sealed behind humidity-controlled glass. A motion sensor installed in 1999 had to be deactivated after it triggered 47 times in a single month, always between 2:00 and 3:15 a.m., and always with no visible cause. The corner, by every instrument, is not moving. But it is not still, and etched faintly into the granite just beneath that beam, found during a mold inspection, is a single word: remain. Some stories don't have endings, they just have disappearances. In the winter of 1933, the Foster cabin had been off exhibit for over 20 years. A reclusive but meticulous curator named Leonard Whitlow was assigned to create a new inventory of its timbers and contents. He was a historian, but he sketched obsessively, trying to capture the things that measurements couldn't. He signed out the key to the cabin's enclosure on January 14th at 5:42 p.m. He never returned it. There is no record of him leaving the museum. No one saw him go. The next morning, his leather satchel was found wedged deep behind a split-stair riser in the cabin's reconstructed stairwell. Inside was his sketchbook. It begins with conventional diagrams and notations, but halfway through, the sketches change. What follows are 5 portrait-style drawings of the Foster family, seated stiffly before the hearth. The layout of each drawing is nearly identical, only the figures change. Or rather, one figure is changed. In each of the 5 portraits, one face is violently scratched out, not erased but scored through with deep, frantic marks. The damage is always in the same position, the far right figure, the one who would be sitting in the 5th seat. The scoring appears to have been done by the same hand that drew the rest. The act of removal was part of the composition. In one of the portraits, there's a faint notation near the bottom: spare 5th seat facing east. Light wrong here. It's Whitlow's handwriting. When his colleagues reviewed the inventory list he had started, they found a line referencing a small cedar chair. The dimensions were correct, but the location was listed as beside the 5th wall. No official diagram of the cabin has ever used that term. A search for Whitlow yielded nothing. His apartment was untouched. He had simply vanished into his work. The sketchbook was sealed in the museum's restricted archive. Curators who have seen it say the last portrait is the most damaged. The scoring of the face is so severe it has pierced through the page, and on the blank sheet beneath, barely visible, are the ghost impressions of 5 letters, transferred through pressure alone. FORAN, the last known surname of the Foster boys from the schoolhouse register. Whitlow's name no longer appears on the cabin's assignment roster. He has been erased, just like the face in his drawing. If you want to hide something, hide it inside something else. In 1963, during a project to digitize Colonial church records, an archivist named Harold Dunn was working on the St. Giles Parish baptism register. While separating the stiff parchment pages, he discovered a sealed, yellowed envelope pressed deep into the spine. The wax seal was a faded blood red and bore no crest, just a faint ring, as if a thumb had been dragged across it. Inside, folded twice, was a small slip of rag paper with a single signature dated October 9, 1793. The handwriting was clean, angular, and belonged to no one they knew. It read, Foster S. No first name, just an initial that didn't match any known member of the household. Abram, Lydia, Nathaniel, Elias, their signatures were known. This one was different, professional, deliberate, But the real discovery was not in the ink. It was in the paper beneath it. Under oblique lighting, technicians noticed a pressure indentation, the ghost of the signature, as though the name had been inscribed through a transfer, not by direct contact. And once they knew what to look for, they started finding it everywhere. A page in the family's meal ledger, a note in the town's property transfer list, a signature field left blank in the 1793 census duplicate. Each one bore no visible ink but the same pressure mark. Slightly off-center, tilting left, descending into the parchment with an unnatural, perfect consistency. A fifth signature haunting the official records of the family. Whoever S. Foster was, they signed more documents than anyone else in the household that year, and they did it without ever leaving a drop of ink. The paper itself, the slip from the envelope, was found to be made of flax threads uncommon in Rhode Island at the time. It came from somewhere else. It belonged to someone else. In a private margin note tucked into the preservation report, an intern wrote, "4 names lived here. A fifth one signs over and over on things they didn't even write." The note was unsigned, but if you look at the bottom corner of the page, there's a faint pressure mark, barely a curve, not enough for a name, just the beginning of the loop of an S. The Foster cabin is no longer on any public floor plan of the Providence Historical Museum. Internally, it is referred to only by its collection number, 1793-14A. It sits behind a black lacquered door labeled, "Staff Only, Historically Fragile." Tour do not mention it, but the logs show movement. The east wall, the one Thaddeus Vale couldn't mark, the one the staff call the fifth wall, remains the focus. Unlike the other sides, it shows no age, no grain, no nail work. Wood density scanners return a null reading. Laser rangefinders bend slightly when aimed at it. When the room's lights are off, the wall retains warmth for hours. Infrared imaging showed a consistent surface temperature of 74 degrees, even when the rest of the room dropped into the 50s. The official explanation is passive solar retention, but the cabin has no windows. In 2018, a new digital keypad was installed to log access to the sealed vault. Only 8 senior personnel had clearance. In the first 18 months, 43 names appeared in the logbook. At first, they thought it was a server error, ghost entries, but the names didn't match any staff records, past or present. The names were Calamy v. Judith Allen, Holland Wade, S. Foster, names from the horsehair bundle, from the dinner ledger, from the pressure marks, all signing into a digital logbook in the 21st century. The security footage shows nothing. No one enters. No one leaves, but the names keep appearing. On April 3, 2023, a junior conservator conducting an inspection placed her palm flat against the fifth wall. When she pulled it away, the impression of her hand remained. Not a burn, not a smudge, but held in low relief, as if the very surface of the wall had softened to accept her touch, and then hardened again around the memory of it. Within 2 hours, the handprint was gone. The museum filed no report. But access to the cabin was permanently restricted. A brushed metal railing was installed 15 feet from the enclosure. The official reason cited was structural instability. But a maintenance contractor found a folded piece of paper tucked beneath one of the railing posts. Inside were 7 names. 6 were listed in even, neat lines. The 7th was half-written. The pen had stopped mid-curve, as if the writer had been interrupted, or perhaps pulled away. The records are accurate. That's the most terrifying part. The surveyors, the clerks, the carpenters, they were all meticulous. They wrote down what they saw, and what they saw was impossible. Something at lot 14 was never accounted for. Not in ink, not in blueprints, not in memory, but it is still there. It's still signing in. It's still leaving its mark. It's still holding a space at the table for guests who have been gone for centuries. The fifth wall wasn't a wall of wood. It was a wall of possibility, a boundary, and the family that lived there weren't its owners. They were its keepers, or maybe its prisoners. They were the 4 solid walls around an empty space that was not empty at all. This story, like the cabin, isn't really about the past. It's about the things we build our lives around, the rules, the measurements, the histories, and the terrifying possibility that those things are built on an unstable foundation. That there are forces and patterns that operate just outside our understanding, that can write their names in our ledgers and change the dimensions of the rooms we live in. We seal them away in museums and archives, hoping to contain them. But some things cannot be contained. They simply wait. What do you think the fifth wall was built to keep in or to keep out? Let me know in the comments below. And if you've ever stood in a place that felt wrong, a room where the angles didn't seem to meet, you might not have been alone. Subscribe for more stories that history was never meant to hold, and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss what comes next.